You might know a channel called PodcastCringe, which is a commentary channel that covers podcast drama. And people have been comparing my channel to his channel, and I'm here to explain PodcastCringe is a piece of garbage who has led to the rise of this incredibly toxic podcast community. So let's do a serious video for once. I imagine it'll be a long one, but I have to give my honest opinion and break down, for who knows how long, how much of a piece of garbage this dude is. But let's get the obvious out of the way. Take my channel when I cover drama. I go out my way to write jokes for the video. I throw in animated comedic sketches. Not that I'm a professional comic, I love it as a hobby. I'm new, I'm not that good, but I want to get decent at it. My videos are more focused on roasting, entertainment, as they've always been, where PodcastCringe is more focused on just critiquing. Now, when I critique comedians, it's through the lens of a fan, and when he does it, it's through the lens of a hater. And that's why I often get positive comments from fans and haters, while he only gets comments from haters, while fans often feel disgusted after watching him for a while. In my eyes, he's created an online career based off just trying to consistently pull people down through manipulating drama, stretching things into a more negative light, and just baiting resentful people, which I'm going to go into more detail later, as I am going to prove everything I claim with clips. I just want you to look out for it when we start to go over the clips. And as someone who's watched Joe Rogan for 9 years and just admires how he spent his entire career, never really stepping on anyone and pulling them down, rather lifting them up, helping those around him, I want to try and emulate that as much as I can. And here's where it might get controversial on my part, where I get called, the kettle calling the pot black. When I roast a comic, I just don't see that as pulling that person down. Like, comics do this all the time, to one another, to random people. Me and my friends do it all the time. And the critique I give really is the same thing that I would say to a friend. If Tom and Bert or Andrew Schultz watched one of my recent videos on them, I'm sure they're likely to laugh, but also get something positive out of it. But the same can't be said for PodcastCringe, and I'll prove that too. Because his critique is just, swirled in with, arrogance, hatred, little understanding, warping situations, just completely ignoring what people say and then saying they said something else. I just can't wait to show you. Now, am I perfect with this? No. Sometimes in an attempt to entertain and make a joke, I just don't live up to that, such as my Akash scene recently. And you might ask, why don't you apply the same loose standards to him? But mine is often a failure to align a joke with a belief, and that's really difficult if you try and do it. And it's way different when all your video is just a collection of statements, where stating your belief is your only goal. And also just include the consistency of his mistakes and the stupid hateful critique, manipulation, etc. It's all gonna make sense soon. But one more thing. Commentary channels like mine, his, and every other commentary channel out there, I hate them. Commentary channels are just all about highlighting negative moments that another creator is having, and it's never highlighting positive moments, as that just doesn't get views. And it gives people a really poisoned perception of that individual that they're talking about. It's similar to when you have a friend who only says bad things about their girlfriend because he doesn't want to tell you all the cringy good things, and then you just think she is horrible. It's that sort of situation. Because the more you can frame someone as bad and, the bigger you can make drama out to be, the more engagement you're just going to end up getting, and then eventually the more money, right? You make a sort of us versus them mentality. I mean, just imagine someone talking about you, but only highlighting your bad moments, your mistakes, and then just exaggerating them in an attempt to put you down such that they can be more popular. We all know someone like that. Rather than being fun to hang out with, being a good laugh and all these different things, that's how they're going to be popular, by being a judgmental asshole and trying to bring everyone else down so they rise to the top. That person is a commentary channel, which is often why my style over time became what it is. It's filled with jokes, sketches. I often paint myself as the bad guy on an ego trip, or call myself mentally ill. It's because I hate the genre. I just do, honestly. To me, it's a filler for the entertainment. And its content just leans way more into just bullying, reputation destroying, drama. Kind of awkwardly enough, it leans into a very feminine thing. It was the feminine bullying ways. And why does he do it? Because in real life there are consequences, but online there just isn't. In fact, you just get paid £400 for doing it. So let me just back everything I'm saying up, and I can do that using his 2 most recent videos. I'm not going to be cherry picking, looking for his worst video. I can just limit myself to 2 of his most recent ones, and I know I'm going to find something.
But before we do that, as you saw in the intro, they had the biggest twat in stand-up comedy, Jimmy Carr, on the podcast.
So Jimmy Carr is called a twat and a comedy philosopher, and I was thinking, what are his thoughts on Jimmy? Because he's already downplaying him, right? And I find this other video of Jimmy Carr.
And so what I've noticed over the years with people who break through the ceiling and make it out of the rat race is this seemingly endless desire to package up their success and sell it on to the next guy. From masterclasses in acting, screenwriting, and directing to short courses on day trading and investing. There are even YouTube channels out there completely dedicated to helping you become the next Mr. Beast. All you have to do is like, subscribe, donate, and watch every single minute of their videos full of flowcharts and pie charts and whatever else they decided you need to know. So you haven't really made it until you've written the book, sold the shirt, and taught a few classes.
So he's comparing Jimmy Carr's selling of a book and a comedy course to controversial courses such as, Become Mr. Beast, a sort of get-rich-quick course. That's really made just to siphon money more than really teach you anything and fill your head with false hopes and dreams. And hopefully you see what I mean by he's getting something that is maybe seemingly innocent and then making it more shady. And then on top of that, he is then painting the intent as that the guy wants to siphon money from his fans. Because guess what? Yeah, you have good courses, you have bad courses, you have good books and bad books, and they're made for different reasons. You can't just paint it all into one. And you can tell Jimmy loves stand-up. He quit a very good job just to pursue that dream. Most people would never make that choice. And he made it without the internet in a time where it was so much harder. To do that, you have to love comedy. And not just that, if he really wanted money, he could just do another special and just not put a lot of effort into it, and fans will still come thinking it'll be like his original material. Or he could just do another show if he wanted. Writing a book is not as profitable as people think. And his online course, it's hard to say until it's out. Like, I know I'm not meant to review this video, but it's just another example of him just stretching things into the negative, poisoning the well, and he always does these cringe, stupid, downplaying sayings.
That I realise Joe Rogan and his buddies have well and truly lost their marbles.
And then he'll just make a really dumb point, but he will word it in a way that makes it sound profound.
I mean, it's not like the art of comedy has been around for thousands of years, dating back to the Roman Empire through to the Middle Ages in the English royal courts, and of course the decades-old form of stand-up comedy, which is exactly what we have today.
It's like, yeah, dude, so has cooking, yet we have books, courses. So has music, yet we have books, courses. Need I go on? You know what's really cringe? Trying to sound really smart, yet still being utterly stupid. That's really cringe.
And my favourite episodes of JRE are the ones with comedians where they sit around for 3 hours, sometimes 5, telling us how smart, funny, and quick-witted they are. Oh, and don't forget successful. They're very successful.
2 comedians talking comedy. Like, that is basically their life. When you go into the workplace, you know what people talk about quite often? Work. Even outside of work, they'll often talk about work. But I love how whenever these comedians do it, it's back rubbing, it's self-congratulatory, ego tripping. It's like you're watching a comedian. It's highly likely that conversation's coming up. Like, why would he not be talking about his book and course to another comic so he could maybe learn something to put in there? Yet no, they're just talking about how great they are.
How many shows? Because it's like airline pilots. We're like airline pilots. It's not really about how many years you've been doing comedy.
Right.
It's about, when you talk to an airline pilot, they tell you how many hours they got in the sky.
Yeah.
And I feel like hours on stage. How many shows you done?
Yes.
That's the thing. I'm like 250 on the year.
Yeah.
And I feel like, okay, I'm in a groove.
Yes.
Like, it's that thing of like, you're match fit.
Okay, did he just compare stand-up comedy to flying a plane? Like, actually, flying a plane in the sky is somehow similar to standing on a stage with a mic telling jokes? Oh, God.
And when Jimmy says, similar to flying with how they talk about hours in the air, I care about hours on stage. And then he goes, why did he make that comparison? Well, that's crazy. It's so cringe. It's like, that's a pretty fair comparison. I imagine the more hours you have on stage, the more likely you are to be better. People make comparisons all the time to things that don't really actually link. It's just like, is this shocking?
These days, all these comics act like they've lived in abject poverty on their way up through the ranks, surviving off beans and rice, couch surfing because they can't afford rent, all in the service of their passion for stand-up comedy. You see, it's all about the art form, folks. It's not about the clout or the fame or the attention.
Neither of them have claimed that they were dead broke on their come-up. Joe Rogan even mentioned he was broke until he got onto Fear Factor. Jimmy Carr said he had a great job in the oil business. They've been very open about this for years. And sure, other comics have basically lied about being broke on their come-up when they really weren't. But why paint that on Joe Rogan and Jimmy when they've... That's so manipulative. You'll also see this a lot, where they talk about loving their job and then he goes, oh, we love being celebrities. No. Joe Rogan has said many times, and we all know this, I don't need to show you this, you want money, not fame. He talks about loving stand-up. Like, what are you saying? It's like, he's just putting words in their mouth.
They eventually got into the dreaded, you just got to take a risk in life discussion. Oh man, this one really kills me. There's nothing worse than listening to two rich twats who had FU money when they decided to follow their dreams, telling everybody else to just take a risk.
So often he has these segments going, oh, they're giving advice. Ugh. Now, as a start, Joe Rogan didn't have FU money when he decided to follow his dreams. He was broke. He started stand-up in 1988. And I checked the wiki. He taught martial arts and did other odd jobs such as construction, limousine driving, and like working with a detective. And he was scraping by, and he even lived with his grandparents for a couple of months. And if you watch Joe Rogan, you do know that he said it wasn't until 2001 when he got into Fear Factor, which is when he could stop worrying about money, which was like 13 years after he started. And take Jimmy Carr, who left a really well-paying job to take a chance pursuing a dream, which might be more impressive because it's kind of easier if you have nothing to lose. If anything, Jimmy was kind of giving up FU money just so he could pursue comedy, and fortunately it worked out and he ended up making it anyway. So yeah, Joe Rogan was kind of broke. Jimmy obviously didn't have FU money at the time, but he definitely probably had some savings. And the weird part is, usually when they're giving advice, they're not even giving advice. Even in the clip, they weren't giving advice. They were just talking about how they got into comedy and how they both took a risk. So this is just a straight up lie. I think he kind of panders to people who aren't in a great position in life, or, a mixture of their own plus like external reasons, who are likely to, compare themselves to others. And then he kind of paints out to them, they had it easy. Money to start with. Despite not even being good, they actually made millions. And by the way, they're awful people. And they enjoy looking down on you going, oh dude, just take a risk and you'll make millions. Set a goal. I mean, Podcast Cringe could have said it's idealistic advice coming from people who made it when so many didn't. Because chasing a dream is really like glorified, but in reality it's its own horror show. You get home from work exhausted to hustle. And let me tell you, time really does fly when you're not making memories. Because that's what pursuing a dream means. It's working full time, then in your spare time where you're exhausted, you're then working towards that. And you're often missing out on making memories where you go out with friends you have a good time with and care about, because you're just not going to get work done if you do that. That's why so many YouTubers are introverted losers. Because if you have a good life, why the hell would you even pursue anything, in my opinion? And the whole time you've not made it, it's just going to eat away at you. It happened to Bill Burr, and you think it won't happen to you when it happened to Bill Burr? And you've seen it on Kill Tony, people who are 8 years in and they just suck, but they probably sacrificed way too much to quit. As like, we're too deep now. So yeah, this glorification of chasing a dream, it's not as idealistic and as wonderful as it's sold to people. It's a path many get lost in and never make it back, and yeah. So I don't know, if Podcast Cringe kind of brought in the darker parts of reality to expose their sort of cringe idealism from their, survivor bias. I know, I wouldn't be making this video, but apparently I'm the cheap knockoff. It's like brilliant, man. Now let's just review this other video, and what really stands out is how 80% of the video is just podcast clips. That's it. Often with him repeating what they're saying. Like, I'm just really shocked that this video is fair use. That's all I'm saying. And just the lack of effort he put into it is just shocking. That's so diabolical, dude. I don't care. That's like theft. 80%, dude. So let me just quickly make this point. Jimmy Carr to him is a scammer, a sellout to prey on his audience, who's also semi-delusional and filled with self-grandeur or whatever else. But now that he's roasted Bert Kreischer, not only does his audience like him now, a bit of a lack of integrity, guess what?
What a performance from Jimmy, 10 out of 10. Even though he's a twat, he's still a friend of this channel.
He's now a friend of the channel because the guy and the channel lacks integrity along with the audience. It's a clear reflection on one another. The moment someone does something that they agree with, like they rip on the right person, it's like we like him again. He's good again because we hate Bert Kreischer more and he was mean to Bert, so now we like him.
If you listen to a couple of egotistical, tone-deaf narcissists for long enough, they'll eventually contradict themselves. And speaking of friends of the channel, I can't go on without giving our boy Chrissy D and Jeff Whittick a quick shout out for giving me a plug on the most recent episode of Chrissy Chaos.
Oh, wow, there's a whole site called Podcast Cringe?
Yeah, I subscribe to them.
Yeah, no, this guy rules. He's a great channel. He covers pretty much all the content.
And what does he do?
These are probably your friends, so you could cut out whatever if I trash any of your friends.
No,
but
you can trash.
Andrew Schultz, he put out a special and he sold it for the first 2 weeks, and he told his fans it'll never come out publicly.
Okay.
And then he just dropped it publicly, so he made millions of dollars off his fans, and then just gave it out to everyone for free.
But let's quickly talk about this, as when he covered it, he left out details. And when the details involve leaving out a very popular clip of Andrew Schultz telling his fans that it will be on YouTube.
But if you're strapped for cash, pirate it. It is what it is. We understand everything exists on the internet. And if you don't know how to figure out one of them pirating sites, I'm sure one day in the future I'll have it up on my YouTube channel. You can wait for that.
That's really dirty, because you're clearly just screwing with his online reputation. You can find many videos where no one thinks he ever said it would be on YouTube when he has. Because the only clip that is ever mentioned is him talking about it on GRE, saying that it would only be out for a limited time, which was a massive mistake on his end. Now, you can say a lot of fans didn't see that it will be on YouTube, because that is completely true. He should have mentioned it more instead of just trying to avoid it every moment he got the chance. YouTube, what? And then if anything, he should have also publicly corrected himself. Instead, he started calling it a pay-per-view event, which is just another way he avoids saying that it's going to be on YouTube later, because, pay-per-view, you kind of think of it like, oh yeah, pay to get it now, get it free later. He just wanted to avoid saying it'll be on YouTube as much as possible. Now look, I would not call Andrew Schultz innocent here. What he did is shady AF. And he really should address it, but because he never addressed it, worse accusations are now out there. But at least cover the drama properly instead of leaving stuff out, because it helps you paint him in a worse light, which benefits you. Now you can say, oh, I didn't even know that clip was there. Dude, it's so easy to find, and I just don't believe it. If you're accusing someone of a scam, in my opinion, do the research before telling hundreds of thousands of people that. And he does this really often with drama. He'll leave bits out. He even throws stuff in. You'll kind of have to take my word for it, okay? Because I'm really trying to limit myself to 3 videos. But, for example, they question if Andrew Schultz ever got a network deal, which he obviously did. He's bigger, I think he's bigger than Tom and Bert, in my opinion. And they got deals. And the idea that one of the networks, goes to him and says, please, can you take out these jokes, is not, mind-blowing. But of course we can't prove it. So if you like Andrew Schultz, you're more likely to say, well, he's telling the truth. But if you dislike him and you say, oh, he's already done the shady marketing, he's probably lying about that too. Most people's thoughts on it are pretty much, how do you feel about Andrew Schultz?
I said this on my previous video, but the red flags are piling up for Tom to ditch Bert and do his own thing.
So here's a point where he gives his criticism, or I guess advice. Now imagine telling someone to ditch their best friend where they've been close for years and they helped each other on their come up. How is this good advice or even good criticism? Do you think Tom's gonna watch that? Oh, of course, I gotta get rid of my best friend. Oh, I detailed the problems in my previous video. You could say, yo, do less projects. Don't cut out the best jokes to sell to Netflix. Stop trying to do the bare minimum and stop prioritizing short-term money by selling us incomplete projects of work. You can even say, have Tom call out Bert a little bit more, because Bert's best moments are kind of him getting roasted by another comic We all kind of love it. But the idea of just ditch your best friend, that's some really constructive criticism. He says that before even saying, why doesn't Tom just do a solo podcast? People really enjoy it. Do you see how his critique and advice is just so dragged towards hatred? To the point where it's kind of an insult.
Most of them are elites who smell their own farts.
Look, I understand saying things in an entertaining way, but elites who smell their own farts? That's just really cringe. And we're done with the video. That was it. So the last video is Andrew Schulz versus Steinfeld.
But slowly, as they found fame and bags and bags and bags of money.
Bags and bags of money. I just want to point this out. I'll say more on it later, but he really just keeps on bringing up this whole they're rich as an insult and a way to dismiss. I mean, it's a very common trope I think you'll find in films where you have this like, well, the horrible, arrogant, cheated the system rich person and the poor person who was, you know, shunned and treated so unfairly and never got the chance, but he was really talented and gifted inside. You know, it's very much akin to those female films where it's like, oh, she never knew she was special, and what do you know, she finds out she's really special, and the cool group of girls is just really mean. But of course he's going to use a cringe, you know, sort of trope.
They're the living embodiment of the saying, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Like, this is such a cringe figure of speech to apply to, like, a comedian. Oh, they were heroes, and now they're evil villains. Like, what? Yeah, they're a little disconnected due to the fame and the money and all that, you know, shocker, but I don't think they were ever heroes. I don't think they've ever become villains. They were entertainers, but gradually they became less relatable. And if anything, instead of being entertaining, quite often they're now embarrassing. I know this sounds a bit like a stretch, but he does continuously try and paint people out as bad. And I feel like it does begin to like subconsciously like go on to you like, oh yeah, they are horrible people. They are villains now. They were great. They've fallen from grace. I don't think he's trying to do this intentionally where he's trying to like subliminally, you know, like make you unconsciously hate them more. I think it's just a thing that, you know, shitty people do naturally.
Why do they even make the end of the bread? If we don't use it, just stop the bread.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
Isn't that
You've been bringing up great points and act like that's a regular Seinfeld bit. I'm like, yo, that's a fucking banger.
Yeah. Seinfeld's whole act. I'll write Seinfeld
it's great
right
points?
now. Right now.
So this is way back in 2020, just before Schulz really started to blow up, and his criticisms of Jerry were centered around how formulaic and vanilla his comedy was, which, to be honest, is a pretty fair criticism. I've always been a massive fan of the TV show Seinfeld, but his actual stand-up comedy, it always came across as a little bit forced and overly performative, which doesn't necessarily make it bad, but I wouldn't go as far as to call him trash like Schulz just did. But you could also sense some bitterness coming from Andrew, perhaps due to the fact that he hadn't really found his stride yet. He was just starting to make some real money from stand-up comedy and podcasting, and compared to Jerry with his predictable vanilla comedy, Schulz felt like Jerry's fame and fortune wasn't deserving.
Now, I'm actually going to agree with Cringe here, as I really want to show that he does occasionally make a very good point, which is often why some people get into it. It's very easy to watch content, it's a lot of clips, it's a very bland take, and then when they get into it, they slowly kind of get influenced into hating these comedians more, giving rise to a more toxic community. And then when people join that community, they're like, you know, when you have like 1,000 people going, they're horrible, it's like, they must be, right? Or you just kind of end up leaving that video, just not feeling good about yourself after watching that content. And I think what's frustrating Andrew Schulz in the clip, and also many people in the audience will say, and even comedians, is that people's comedic talent isn't even proportional to their audience size anymore. People aren't popular for their comedy as much as they're popular by who they know, how big is their podcast, how big is their channel. Like Steinfeld, I'm guessing, is big because of his show, not his stand-up. In a time YouTube wasn't a thing with its, you know, variety of content, so you had everyone watching TV, and then everyone kind of talked about the same shows, similar to when, you know, Game of Thrones was out, which led to Steinfeld blowing up even more. And I think that's often why you will find so many big comics do come off really overrated and maybe somewhat undeserving. But you should also add on top of this that comedy is subjective. If Andrew doesn't enjoy Steinfeld's comedy, that's fine. For one person that doesn't like it, 3 other people do. So I doubt Steinfeld even cares. He's performing for those that actually enjoy his content. Those that don't, hopefully find another comic that they can actually resonate with. Like, if you don't find me funny, that's fair. I hope you find someone else who makes you laugh. Like, Steinfeld is more of a nihilistic style of comedy. I'm not really surprised that Andrew Schulz isn't resonating with it. I imagine Steinfeld kind of understands that and wouldn't take it personally. Like, I'd imagine someone who enjoys really dry humor wouldn't enjoy Schulz's comedy. But I enjoy how one comedian not really enjoying another comedian's drama. And with the verses, you'd kind of expect that Jerry's going to say something back, but no, he doesn't. But of course, we're going to put verses because it sounds better and it sounds more dramatized. When really the video should be titled, Andrew Schulz thinks Jerry Steinfeld is overrated.
And we actually saw how annoyed Schulz gets when famous comedians don't know who he is. There was that time when Rogan was telling Chappelle about Andrew's PowerPoint presentations on YouTube during the pandemic, and Chappelle basically said, look, good luck to him, but that's not stand-up, that's not what I do.
That's not what I do.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
It's different.
So it seems like Schulz is a little bit sensitive about his place in the stand-up comedy world.
Sensitive? If you were a comic doing as well as Andrew Schulz, wouldn't you be a little bit upset if those you respected, like, I don't know, like Bill Burr, Dave Chappelle, like, you know, name any great comedian you want, wouldn't you be a bit upset if they didn't even know you? Because imagine getting a compliment from Dave Chappelle. Do you know how good that would feel? Or even Bill Burr. Especially when you're that big, you'd think they'd seen your stuff and they maybe like you. But to see that they haven't even heard of you, like, I'd be upset. Like, sensitive about it, we all would be. Shut up. But it's just another way to kind of insult him over something that would be incredibly relatable.
And some of you didn't agree with me, but for some reason, I feel like Jerry's arrogance kinda suits him in a weird way.
I love how this is Jerry versus Andrew. And for Jerry, we just get a random clip of him talking on a show while, you know, Podcast Cringe goes, I really like his arrogance. It doesn't bother me. Like, what has any of this got to do with Andrew versus Schulz?
Before we get to that, can I just say that I might have been wrong about Seinfeld, yo. I might have been wrong about Seinfeld.
Did he say something nice about you on a podcast?
No, not at all. But despite him being very rude to me,
yeah.
At our one chance encounter, could have had a horrible day. You know what I mean? He just could have had a bad day. A lot of things go on in people's days.
Well, this is pretty recent, right?
Yeah, it's pretty recent, like 15 years.
I mean, it just feels as if they're playing, mocking Andrew's previous attitude towards him. Like, this is just nothing. You know, this isn't Mark Maron, who consistently insulted Joe and his friends on his special, on other podcasts, on shorts to their face. This isn't anything like Howard Stern. I mean, we're really just stretching the most nothing topic ever into a video right now and really trying to highlight it as something bigger than it is. And it should really show you how he'll kind of turn almost nothing, just people joking around, giving their honest opinion and all this stuff, and he'll just turn it into drama, just straight away, like, content.
Imagine Andrew Schulz calling out people for being grifters because they're jumping on the latest trends and pretending to have hot takes. I made a video last week about Schulz having an epiphany and discovering what grifting actually is.
So he calls Andrew Schulz a grifter, which today, I've only ever seen it really used in left-wing politics. A grifter is not having a genuine belief in the thing that you're telling your audience, but saying it because it kind of brings you in money. Now, if Andrew Schulz is doing that with his political takes, he's definitely not very good at it. But to stretch that word, that is kind of an insult, and kind of sounds like an insult, to say it's a word that now describes people who are jumping on trends and giving their hot takes, that is basically what you're doing. That is what I'm doing. That is what everyone with a YouTube channel is doing. And what people do in real life. Something's popular, we learn about it, and we talk about it with friends because it's currently, on the news, and we're all kind of, had our eye on it. And now we're stretching this, kind of standard human behavior and what people do online really often into an insult. Come on. If he went, I could get a lot more views if I said I supported Israel or, Palestine, pick one, and then decided to go that route, not because he's looked into it to form a strong opinion, rather just for the money, then yeah, grifter. But also, even worse, if you really listen to Schulz, it doesn't describe him, and the whole thing makes no sense.
The people who've been consistent throughout the whole time, I'm not critical of them. You have an opinion,
maybe we agree or disagree on it, but you've always felt this way and you took the heat for feeling this way. You took it. The other people, they were too much of a fucking coward. They were too much of bitches to actually take the heat. They were like really quiet. They're like, I'm not going to say anything because what will the people on Twitter say? Maybe I'll lose followers. Maybe people won't watch my show. They were too pussy to share their opinions. All of a sudden now that there's views in it, now that there's clicks in it, now that there's ad revenue in it, now that the numbers are up, now you're talking about it? Nah, you're a grifter.
Schultz said, I respect those whose political stance and opinions are consistent, even despite social backlash, compared to those who silence their own thoughts to avoid confrontation, but when their thoughts are acceptable, that's when they start preaching. That's not a grifter, Schultz, but well done. It would have made more sense if Schultz said, people just conform their beliefs into whatever the group is thinking, often their friendship group. Like, that would be more akin to grifting, but not for money, but for social status. It's a classic Schultz epiphany. It makes no sense. No sense whatsoever. But does Podcast Cringe not have ears to listen to what he's actually saying? Or is he just someone who likes to take people out of context, then stretch it into an insult? That's interesting. You can basically roast Andrew for being completely wrong about what he's saying. You can say, mate, you're in your mid-40s and he's only just figuring this stuff out. That's incredible. So here we have the final clip, which is basically him taking Jerry out of context.
Find something where you love the good parts and don't mind the bad parts too much. The torture you're comfortable with. This is the golden path to victory in life. Work, exercise, relationships, they all have a solid component of pure torture, and they are all 1,000% worth it.
All Jerry is saying is find a job that doesn't torture you too much. For me, I loved bartending. People buy you drinks, everyone's in a good mood, and you just end up being a part of everyone's, embarrassing drunk stories. You can actually pull quite often as a bartender, which is kind of weird. I don't know how that works. Look at me. I'm not the most handsome. Give it a go, dude. I don't know, this is absolutely sound advice. Yeah, don't destroy yourself and look around for a job that doesn't make you want to yourself. But let's see what he says.
Oh man, I'm so done listening to billionaires and millionaires telling us to stop worrying about money and just to work hard. And if you don't like your job, just quit. You'll figure it out.
And he never said, don't worry about money. He only later says, don't make it your main focus. And if you can, try find a job you love. Which makes sense because the speech isn't given to the fucking losers of your fan base that fucking suck. It is being given to graduates who just worked hard to graduate through university, and he's giving them some parting advice while they go onto the workforce. It's the advice isn't for poor, unskilled losers. I was going to say that because it'll probably upset his fan base. Of course, I don't mean any of this. I'm just hitting things with a bat right now.
The other thing I see going on that throws a lot of people off these days is thinking, I've got to make as much money as I can. I personally believe the real game is I want to have the coolest job.
I feel as though his audience needs to be told that success just isn't about having 1 million in the bank. It's about pushing yourself to have a better life than the life you would have had if you didn't push yourself a bit harder. Someone in retail can be successful because they got off drugs, which was caused by a violent, drug-ridden childhood. So they didn't do that well at school. And they could have taken welfare and kept on the drugs. But instead, they pushed to be more. They got a job, they started a relationship, and they started a family. And it's that guy is very successful. But yeah, he doesn't have 1 million in the bank. But what he did was incredible. Podcast Cringe praise off the envy of the poor more than a communist. He then calls them Nepo babies, which is just another word that doesn't even describe that. So they're Jaden Smith now? What are you saying? Anyway, I feel as though I've said enough and I've broken down enough to kind of give you an idea of what this channel is about and maybe the community that it's actually starting to raise, which go about attacking podcast episodes. It's not like Fighter and the Kid, which was a bit more bantery and fun. Sure, you had the people who hated them, but this audience isn't, an audience that likes to riz a comedian and make fun of them. It's just, let's hate them. It's pathetic, and they're gonna hate on my video. They're gonna dislike it. They're gonna leave mean little comments. Go for it. I'll be playing a game, or I'll be out. Yeah, wow. What a community. Like and subscribe, and have a good one. I'm gonna go hang out with mates, play games, the usual, and I hope you're having a good one too, dude.